everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Maureen, and today I'm going to be sharing with you how to make McCall's 8534. We're going to be making view A, so go ahead and grab your fabric and your sewing tools and let's get started. By the way, while I have you, just know that you can find the same exact tutorial on the Simplicity channel along with other tutorials just like this one. All right, so if you're making view A like me, you're gonna need pattern piece number 1, and you're going to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of lining. This is your bodice front. You're going to need pattern piece number 2. This is the bodice back. You're gonna cut 2 of fabric and 2 of lining. You're going to need pattern piece number 6. This is the pants back. You're going to cut 2 of fabric, and if you're going to add lining, you're gonna cut 2 of that as well. You also need pattern piece number 5. This is your pants front. You're going to cut 2 of fabric, and again, optional for lining, you'll cut 2 for that as well. You're also going to need elastic pieces. So you won't be cutting any fabric of these, but you'll need pattern piece number 4, pattern piece number 3, and pattern piece number 7, which is the elastic guide for your waist. All right, so you're going to take pattern piece number 1. And on the double notch side, you are going to stitch this down right sides together. Sew this down at 5/8. Go ahead and press that seam open, and then you want to grab pattern piece number 2, and you should have single notches on the sides, so matching up right sides together, matching up those notches. Go ahead and stitch this down on both sides. Take this to your machine and sew it at 5/8 on each side, just like how you did the center seam. So at this point, you should have finished the bodice pieces, and you want to complete the same steps for your lining pieces as well. So go ahead and complete those same steps, and then you should have 2 of these pieces. Placing your lining and your outer bodice pieces right sides together, we are going to sew these together. Okay, so go ahead and sew 5/8 around this edge here, and then from this top all the way down to the end. We are going to leave the straps stitch free, so we are not sewing down the straps at all, and we're not sewing the sides here, and we're not sewing the bottom edge. Okay, so take pattern piece number 3, which is your elastic guide, and go ahead and cut your elastic to the size of pattern piece number 3. Now, when you do this, do not stretch out your elastic. The other thing I want you to notice are you have markings on your pattern piece here. Go ahead and transfer those markings onto your piece of elastic, which I've already done. So you'll have a marking for the center front, you'll have a marking for the shoulder side and all of that. So go ahead and transfer those, and this will be really helpful in attaching this elastic to your bodice piece. Okay, and then you should also have similar markings at the center front here, and then on the side, and then up by the shoulder openings. Using some pins this time, I'm going to take this dot right here, which is the center front, and match it to this center front dot right here. And you may have a bit of resistance with some of these, but that's okay. And you may have to stretch and sew this at the same time. And you want to keep this within the seam allowance on the lining side. So on your lining pieces, pin the elastic like how you see here. And this is for the neckline piece. Okay, so you see how there's a little bit of slack for the elastic. When you sew it down, make sure that you are stretching this elastic to match the length of the actual fabric. Okay, so you'll probably have to do some stretching here and some stretching here. And go ahead and take this to your machine. Regardless of the type of thread you have, I do recommend doing a zigzag stitch because you don't want the elastic to get detached or to pop or anything like that with normal wear and tear, or even just during the sewing process. Okay, so now you're going to take pattern piece number 4. You're going to cut the elastic for this length, and this time you're going to cut 2. And you have similar markings along this as well. So go ahead and mark your elastic with the dots. And what I did was, so I wouldn't get confused on which end is which, I actually put 2 dots where the center back is. That way I will be able to tell which side I need to put the center back on. Okay, so once again, on the lining side, go ahead and pin your elastic to the seam allowance. I'm pinning the center back side here. This dot on this side matches up with the seam right here. This dot right here matches up to this dot here. And because this is such a longer stretch of elastic, I'm going to put another pin here just to secure it in place. You'll want to complete these same steps for the other side of the bodice. Now take this to your machine and stitch this down with a zigzag or lightning bolt stitch within the seam allowance, just like we did the other time before. So go ahead and turn this right side out and give it a really good press along all of the seams and whatnot. For this part, you definitely want to use like a pressing hand to press this out, and also use maybe like a clap or two depending on your fabric or the resistance. When you are turning this right side out, it could get a bit stubborn just because you're working with knit, and again, depending on the resistance. Okay, so now you are going to understitch the lining side. So what that means is that where we put the elastic, and on your lining side, understitch right along here. Okay, and you're gonna go as far as you can up this side and even around the keyhole. Again, going as far as you can, and then on along this other side too. So you probably will have to stop right about here because again, it's such a narrow space that your machine may not allow you to go that far. So go ahead and do that at your machine right now, and then we'll move on to the next steps. Once this is complete, this is how it should look on the lining side of your fabric. So we're going to set this to the side and work on our pants. All right, so take pattern pieces 5 and 6, put them right sides together, and then pin it or clip it at the inner leg. And we are going to stitch this down at 5/8 at our machine, and do this for both leg pieces. Okay, so open up your pant legs and put them right sides together, and now we're going to work on sewing our seat. So make sure that your single notch sides are right sides together, and that the notch sides, the double notch sides, are right sides together as well. And you are going to put pins or clips all the way up to this double notch right here, because that's where we are going to stop sewing at. And the reason we're going to stop sewing there is because this is the back, and so we've got to install our zipper right there. So you are going to stitch at 5/8 all the way through this seat, and you're going to stop right there. All right, keeping everything right sides together, join your legs together, and now we are going to pin and sew down the outer leg seam. So remember, we left this part open, your front should be sewn all the way up, and now we're just going to pin the sides down, and we're going to sew this at 5/8 at our machine on both sides. All right, so now that we have sewn up the sides, go ahead and do a quick fit check. And if you feel like your pants are too baggy, do not take in the sides. I highly, highly, highly recommend that if you do any sort of adjustments on the pants, do it within the inseam, and it'll make a huge difference as far as how snug the pants will fit your legs. But if you decide to take in the hip, you could run the risk of your top not fitting your bottom. So my recommendation, always do it in the inseam and it won't disappoint. Before we attach our bodice to our pants, I want to call out that I am going to be diverting from these instructions. According to the instructions, the bodice piece is going to be attached to the pants through all thicknesses. I'm actually going to attach just the outer piece and leave the lining open. That way I can install the zipper and enclose it and make it a nice clean finish on the inside. You are more than welcome to follow these instructions or to follow along with my sew along. It's completely up to you, but I did want to mention that it is going to be a little bit different than what you see inside of the pattern envelope. Yeah, go ahead and open your top up, and you want to pin the outer lining to your pants. Precision will be key here, just because this will also be the area where we are going to put our casing in. So make sure you're matching up all of the seams and all of the notches and all of the edges. That way you can have a very seamless casing install. All right, so take this to your sewing machine and you're going to do one row of stitches at 5/8, and then you are going to do another row of stitches at 1/4 inch from the top edge. Go ahead and take pattern piece number 7 and cut an elastic piece at the length that you cut your pattern pieces at. I cut an 18, so I cut it from here to here, again, not stretching it out. And what you're going to do is you're going to funnel it through that casing that we just made. I highly recommend using like a safety pin or some sort of bodkin that you have, and then go ahead and stitch the edges of this closed. Okay, so make sure you press the seam allowance down towards the pants after you have installed, or I'm sorry, after you have put your casing through, and then, like I said earlier, make sure you stitch this down. I stitched mine at about 5/8 from the edge here. And then, if you can't already tell, I did add some really thin pieces of interfacing just to stabilize this part of the zipper. It's not mandatory, but it's something that I like to do, especially because this is a knit fabric that's going to have an invisible zipper. So go ahead and grab your invisible zipper, and I always like to test my zipper out before I install it, because you definitely don't want a broken zipper installed beautifully into your piece. And what I also do is sometimes if I feel like it needs a good press, I'll give it a good press. Now, when you're installing your invisible zipper, always have some sort of invisible zipper foot if you can. It's extremely helpful and effective in getting a really nice and clean finish with your zippers. So we are going to install this now, and I'm going to pull my teeth, or pull the zipper tab all the way down and move it out of the way. So up here at the tape, I'm going to make sure the teeth line up to the edge of the bodice, or the top edge of the bodice. And you want to keep this as flat as possible. Another pro tip about doing your invisible zipper, if you're working with knit fabric, you may want to widen that stitch length, but I also highly recommend, no matter what fabric that you're working with, to always baste your zipper down first. That way you can make sure that it lines up properly and that you've got a nice, good, clean finish before you sew it down completely with 2.5 stitch length. Okay. So as you can see, the teeth are facing outward and the tape is on the inside, because when we zip this up eventually, it's going to fold in like that. So go ahead and do this to both sides, or go ahead and do this to one side of your jumpsuit, and we're going to take this to the machine and baste it down. So I'm changing out my regular foot and I'm putting in this invisible zipper foot. As you can see, it's got 2 channels where the teeth lie as you're stitching it down. So again, highly recommend buying an invisible zipper foot for installs just like this. Okay, so once you have this side stitched down, go ahead and let's do the other side. So again, making sure my zipper is flat, I'm going to flip the tape over, line up the top of the zipper to the top of the edge of the bodice, and I'm pinning this at 5/8. Most zipper tape is around 3/8, but I'm pinning this at 5/8 so that way when you close it up, everything will be even. Okay. All right, so everything looks great, and if you haven't already, go ahead and do your final stitch on your zipper. And so I just like to run the zipper tape up and down to make sure no stitches have gotten caught in the zipper teeth. So the next step is to take a sandwich of sorts, I know that sounds really silly, and take the outer fabric and fold it over the zipper teeth just like how you see me doing here. And you're going to grab your pins or your wonder clips, and you are going to pin these raw edges together, and you are going to take this to your sewing machine and sew this at about approximately 3/8 of an inch. You definitely want to avoid stitching down the zipper teeth or stitching over the zipper teeth. The idea here is to have a very pretty finish and a functional zipper as well. So now I am removing my invisible zipper foot and I'm actually installing my regular zipper foot, which is more narrow and allows for that 3/8 of an inch on the zipper tape. If you have a foot like this, great, or you can go back to your regular foot as well. Once you are finished stitching this down, go ahead and trim the corners. That way when you turn it right side out, it's a nice and clean finish. All right, so we have now enclosed our zipper. So now we have a really clean finish on the inside. Go ahead and slip stitch this closed as neat as you can, especially if you're working with knit. I understand that could be a little difficult, but go ahead and slip stitch that closed. And then we are going to move on to our straps. So I want your strap to look like this, but I'm going to show you how I got there. I untucked the strap and I trimmed the seam allowance just a little bit, like really just a smidge. That way the fold over could be kind of nice and neat later on. So be careful not to nick the actual strap, but just get a little bit of that seam allowance off. Tuck in these edges and do a top stitch just like this. And then we're going to move on to our buckles. All right, so turn your jumpsuit around so that way it's facing you, or the front is facing you. And you're going to take your buckle set and you are going to slide the fabric through the bar and fold it over the hardware at about 5/8. And then you'll do the same thing to the other strap as well. Now, I recommend testing out the clasp and everything before you actually stitch it down. And keep in mind, too, that this neckline crisscrosses. So I know it probably looks a little confusing, but it all works out in the end, I promise. All right, once you are through, go ahead and give your jumpsuit a really nice hem, and you're all set. All right, you guys, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Now, if you love this tutorial and you want to see more like this, let me know in the comments, and be sure to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. I'll see y'all next time. Bye.